Radio or its staff.
Good morning. Listen, it is indeed an exciting and good morning to be with you. My name is Clinton Paris, and I am one of the co-hosts of Straight Up the Middle here In Touch News Radio. And I don't know about you all, this show, it really drives my week because I am always thinking all week long, I can't wait to Saturday to get to talk to the wonderful people that tune in to In Touch News Radio and listen to what we talk about. I know you're out there and I know you're listening, and we appreciate your support because there's always something dynamic that happens that just gets me all fired up, and I need this therapy. So I thank all of you for joining in on Saturday to listen to me and my co-host banter about the actions and activities that have been happening and going on. But needless to say, it is indeed good to be here. And before I go any further, I want to show some respect and deference to my great and wonderful co-host, the great Pete Edwards. Good morning, Pete. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Glad you fired up on the real issues of the day. A lot of people are firing up trees today, but I made to each his own, my brother. You know.
But how can you not be? I mean, I will say this absolutely. When you take a step back, and Pete, you and I, we both involved in our community and all these kinds of things. It is rare that things don't improve and move in a positive direction. And I don't confuse that with where I want them to go. But they are moving. And it never do we have a day where I don't think there is really an opportunity, really a possibility that we can have hope for what may be coming in the future. So for that reason, I'm always really excited getting in there. But what caught your attention this week, Pete, that, said, listen, I can't, Sally, I want to talk with old Clint about this.
Oh, I couldn't hear him for a minute.
Okay. No, I'm just saying, I'm sure what caught your attention this week? You thought, you know what, on Saturday, I'm going to make sure we get this out to the public. Anything in particular?
Well, yeah, several things on the local issue and the national issue. The thing that caught me highly interested in a week where the Texas governor penalizing the legislature for not going to pay him because the Democratic Party walked out on a moral issue regarding voting laws. At the same time, Biden signed the Juneteenth bill. You look at the people. You look at the people who voted again. Let me tell you something. Here's what's catching my eye locally as I had coffee with a couple of young people this morning coming in, and nationally. I'm afraid the Juneteenth celebration is going to be two track, well, maybe three tracks, but two tracks that will be detrimental to our community. It reminds me of what has happened to the Martin Luther King Day of celebration. I don't want to sound negative, but fact speaks for itself. The MLK celebration has turned into more of a commercial issue, and it has turned into a day of violence. When I look around and see what's going on with Juneteenth today, and as people have been leading up to it all week, it's turning into commercialism. And when I talk to young people, they have no idea what Juneteenth is all about. And I strongly suspect that based on previous reviews of what has happened on MLK Day, that Juneteenth Day will turn into a day of violence in our neighborhoods. It's you've seen it all week with our kids. Even locally, they had some mothers on with the chief of police begging help from the community on some of these senseless murders. So I found out from young people this morning, Clint, that they have no idea what Juneteenth is all about. They are correct in saying that the school system aren't going to teach them, but that's why you teach the foundation and you teach our kids how to pour a proper slab of a foundation so that it could withstand the test of time. So that's the main thing today. I think we're going to be misled on Juneteenth, and I think we're going to do our kids that are coming behind us, the grandchildren also, that we're going to mislead them on the importance of Juneteenth as we go forward. And
let's
so that's
let's explore that a little bit, Pete, because one of the things I wanted to really do, I wanted to spend some time kind of unpacking Juneteenth uh, from a couple of dynamics. One, understanding the history of slavery and how it finally starts to end the government imposed or authorized ownership of other people. And then it transitions over into the Jim Crow era, which was now where we won't have ownership, but we will have so many laws and restrictions on various things that you will be virtually enslaved. And then we'll add a fear factor to it as well, that kind of in domestic terrorism that allows us to still exploit people based on race, which is what Jim Crow came with. And then we kind of moved into civil rights to kind of undo some of that. But let's talk about Juneteenth. Here's my understanding of Juneteenth. January 1 of 1861, you have the Emancipation Proclamation being read at Camp Hampton under the Emancipation Tree to the escaped slaves who gathered there at the military installation, announcing that in all of the rebelling states, slaves are now free. And it was that message that had not gotten delivered to Texas until General Granger gets there 2 years later. That's kind of my understanding of how these things. And then, of course, he issues his general order saying all slaves are now free, and relationships between former slave owners and slaves are that of employer and employee or whatever it may be in slavery. And from that whole dynamic, you get out in the Southwest right there, Texas, Oklahoma, and those areas. They celebrate Juneteenth because that's where it happened. Is that your understanding as well? That's kind of how Juneteenth kind of emerges.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. Let me look at it from an independent thought of view. Have we ever wondered why it took Texas so long to get the message out to the slaves?
Well, the economics. I mean, they didn't want to, and they didn't want to do it in the other states either.
Well,
but they were in charge.
Well, that's the same thing as when you look at. It's the same philosophical format when you look at, let's say, Brown versus the Board of Education with all deliberate speed. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So that's why I said this morning to the guys over coffee and a couple of young people we were talking to, don't misread why everybody is jumping on the Juneteenth Day of celebration. And one of the old timers, OG more older than I am, say, well, better late than never. But you know what? It's still late. And so we have to tell our kids that freedom is not an understanding that it's always going to be there for you. You have to sustain it.
I would agree with that.
Okay, so that's where I'm at.
It comes at different levels. But so when people talk about, well, why have we not celebrated Juneteenth in Florida? Well, one, it didn't happen in Florida. It's not part of Florida's history and culture. And because it was such a localized event, it's not like we celebrate Emancipation Day either. So I get that whole piece. And from a historical standpoint, the end of slavery is it really, the legalized slavery ended. But Pete, we've been fighting for full rights since America started. So I can get why there's been a muted response. Now let's talk about how we now use Juneteenth, because now you've got a national federal holiday. You have got a moment when the whole country can stop and reflect. And so it becomes an opportunity to educate people who have no real connection to this day and event. So I don't blame the world and America for not teaching Juneteenth. It's not part of my family history. We didn't teach it in my family, talk about it, discuss it. But I think that America is slowly coming to terms with its racist history and past and how it's affecting us now. We may not get there in our lifetime, Pete, but I think there's hope. And now you mentioned Martin Luther King Day. It's one of my most exciting days of the year. There are always going to be buttholes and idiots who do irrational things on those dates. But throughout our country, I think that is a great day when a lot of people take a moment to reflect on the struggle and the triumph. Because Pete, check this out: the African American story in America is a one of triumph. It's a triumph over all the things that have been done to try to hinder the development and growth of people to the fullness of what America offers. And we've triumphed over that. Not everybody, not all at once, and we're still on that march. But it's a triumphant story that I think everybody, should be able to find something to celebrate in. And I know we have our Confederate, folks out there who have their certain leanings and things of that nature. And you're always going to have people that adhere to those kinds of things. But I look at it different. I never look at the least and the worst of us as a measure of our success. I look at where we're going, and I think Juneteenth creates that opportunity for a lot more education. What's going to happen, Pete? How about this? What are your thoughts about this, Pete? What about all the other atrocities and coming to terms with those, like Rosewood? What do you think? I think Juneteenth is going to open the door for a lot more exploration along those lines. What are your thoughts?
Well, from a historical perspective. Here's what I think how Juneteenth should be operated as we try to bring on new leadership among young people behind us and all. Juneteenth should see what happened with Martin Luther King holiday. We got this day of service. All right, everybody gets on board of that, but it's a fake day of service because you take the TV cameras off and all like that. Every day, as we rebuild our community and fortify the good things in our community and get rid of the negative things, including this violence against children within our community, every day should be a day of service. But when when I see corporations and everybody shows up, and even within the black community, some of the leadership and all that talks about a day of service. Every day is a day of service if we're rebuilding and we want to build upon the goodness of our community. Now, when I look at Juneteenth, what I'm thinking from a very assertive, militant young point of view, I would use Juneteenth as a starting point, and every year measure the progress that we made on prison reform, the progress that we made on inviting and revitalizing men and women, in particular a fast-growing amount of young women coming back into our community from prisons, starting point and a measuring point, how we deal with mental health issues within our community, how we're improving on those services. See, those are nuts and bolts issues to me. And people say, well, a Republican saying that? Well, yeah, that's what black conservative Republicans think about. Rebuilding our community, don't avoid interacting with our men and women coming back from prison, that kind of stuff. So I'm leery. I really believe that in less than 5 years, the meaning of Juneteenth will not have any legs on it as far as rebuilding our community and to show how far we really come as far as fortifying what we need to do and strengthen our community.
Well, let me ask you this, Pete. Let me throw this out. Why can't Juneteenth be simply as a day of remembrance and celebration? Remembering what slavery was all about so that we don't repeat that same thing. And what I'm concerned about when you say that is, if you make it such a heavy lift that it's got to solve all the issues ever affecting the African American community and measured by how it does that, then it'll fail. But if the day is used as a day to highlight, again, the triumph over that terrible period and the hope that freedom brings, that becomes a starting point as opposed to a day of measurement of what's not been accomplished. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, if you don't measure it, you're going to doom to repeat it in a different way, but it's going to come out the same. We're still behind. And I said it, and I'll say it again, Clint. It looks good on paper. But when I saw it quickly, the commercialization, where it's profit over people, then that tells me the story that's going to be told by why Juneteenth came about is going to be one quote, one paragraph, or whatever, or half a page, not even a half a page of historical notes, and the rest of it is going to be commercialization and capitalism. That's the way
I
it's
think
going,
that
and that's where
the,
it's at.
the first part of, I think that I would say the first maybe 20 years of Juneteenth is going to be about history. It's not going to be what you, like you said, that's comes, the first thing is going to be, let's tell this hit, because America has not done a very good job of telling all of its history. You know, it makes up lies that you want to have be true, and then you try to build on those lies. A lot of what we've got from the Confederacy and the end of the Civil War is based on that. Pure, unadulterated, just, we want this to be true. We want it to have been an honorable fight. We want it to have been about not the humanity of what we're doing to other people. We want to make it, so we try to build that history, and we've allowed that to foster.
But who
so
do
I
we
think
tell it to?
First part of Juneteenth is going to be the real history of slavery in this country and understanding how integral it was to the economic progress America made in catching up with the rest of the world. That's just the reality of it. So I think the first 20 years is going to be about historical things and reshaping how America's history becomes more fully toned and presented to the world.
All right, question for you. If we're going to do that and we talk about slavery in America, are we going to ignore the participation of Africans that participated in the capitalization and selling our folks over here? And see, they don't teach that now. They don't teach that to our kids.
Listen, we ourselves, like today, you know, you mentioned the violence. Well, it's not other people coming in our neighborhood shooting up places. We're shooting up our own places. We're the ones with the guns. No one's coming in your neighborhood. Those are the people in your neighborhood that are creating the violence and things of that nature. And so we have to hold ourselves accountable. I agree with that. Also, the Native Americans. You know, people want to go, oh, we had Black Wall Street. Anybody ever tell you how those Black folks got to Tulsa? Where they came from? They were freed slaves of the Indian tribes. Mm-hmm. So I'm just thinking that we tell a fuller story, and I don't mind accountability. Now, capitalism, though, is going to make its way in. People are going to make some money.
Already has.
But and they're going to make a lot. Listen, and they're going to make a lot of money. Black folks going to make money. White folks going to make money. Conservative churches going to make money. People are going to make money because capitalism feeds itself through anything in America. You mentioned the prison thing. That's capitalism. Anything that you come up with in America, capitalism seeps its roots into it and extracts a profit from it. So I'm expecting that there will be absolutely a lot of profit from made around Juneteenth, which I have no issue with that. But I absolutely believe this. It's now going to be much, much harder, Pete, for people to lie and ignore and not recognize the real history and the slave. And once that history is told, because think about this, Pete. If we're this uninformed, imagine what the white community's history of this is. Imagine what their understanding of slavery is. That we're so uninformed about it, the events that happen. They're as much uninformed as we are because it's not been taught, and people have not gone back in information, you know, and looked up stuff. I'll tell you, I'm gonna give you this grant. I may have talked about this last week, Pete. You know, it caught my eye when I was reading about the Tulsa riots and all that stuff. I was like, how those Black folks ended up in Greenwood, in Oklahoma? It just baffled me. And after I researched it, I found out, oh, they didn't walk from Georgia to Alabama and Kentucky and Arkansas just because they wanted to. They were brought there as slaves with the Indians. And then they were freed and they stayed where they were. So I just think that this Juneteenth for the first 20 years is going to be about history. And suddenly we're going to hear about a lot of other atrocities in Louisiana and Alabama and Virginia, a lot of other places. African Americans have been victimized. And then I think we start to get to the atonement process. How do we atone for what has happened? I think that's going to be the way it goes.
Well,
What are your thoughts about that?
you made a mistake, Clint. Clint,
Oh,
let me tell you where I think you went wrong. When you mentioned about there's nothing wrong with profits. Here's the issue with that. Just like Martin Luther King, everybody profits off of that commercialism. Okay? Now they're doing it immediately with Juneteenth and all. Prior to this year, of course, it was neighborhood thing. But you know what the issue I have with the profitness? How do we show as positive examples? How do we show as living examples? How do we show as proof that the profits that's being made off of Juneteenth celebrations and all are reinvested in our community? That's the issue I have. It's like I give our listeners throughout the country and the world that listens to us. I give you a better analogy of it. We the black business people push us all the time, the regular citizens, to push for minority contracting and the whole bit, right? We want our fair share of contracts, the whole bit. But they never say, these companies, they never come in our neighborhood and say, we want to hire brothers and sisters. They never even put out a statement once a doggone year that talks about how they reinvested some of the money that they made by us coming down to City Hall and all, begging and pleading and cajoling and everything about more expansive use of minority contractors. But you know what? We don't tell the story because we're afraid to tell the story to the kids, and they done picked up on it now. We're afraid to tell the truth that guess what? As hard as we fight for black businesses and all like that, they don't return the favor by hiring and reinvest it in our community. So that's where as a conservative I'm saying no. We always fuss at the white people for not reinvestment, but as we push, and that's what's going to happen with Juneteenth, MLK, and all these other things, we don't hold our folks accountable that if we're going to support you profit-wise or whatever, what the hell are you doing that you show us where you reinvested in our community? Even I give you a perfect example from a school point of view. Name one black publishing company or whatever in the history of we've been celebrating Juneteenth, particularly the last 15 years, have made a concerted effort to combine with other companies or nonprofits in a joint venture to publish books and give them out free to our kids in elementary school that details what Juneteenth is all about. But I guarantee, I'm just saying, bro.
No, you dead on, Pete. Hold on first. So I just got a note that Ed and Lorraine is going to give me a quick call. I'm going to bring him in real quick. He just popped into the waiting room, and he wants to make some comments about Juneteenth. So I'm going to bring him on, let him make those comments. So give us a minute, folks out there listening. This is former State Representative Ed Lorraine. He's going to join the conversation for a few minutes because he's hearing this conversation. I'm sure he's all fired up about Juneteenth. And Pete, you know, you have a way of sticking a pin in people and getting them revved up. I listen. I do a great job. Here myself. So Ed and Lorraine, are you there with us on the line?
I just called it like I said, Clint.
Yeah, he was just coming in. I'm hold on for a second. There he is. All right. He's still connecting. So we have State Representative Ed Lorraine. And listen, though, I think making it a federal holiday. You can't talk about Juneteenth in any way, shape, or fashion without talking about slavery. I don't care. And whatever talk you have, it's kind of like talking about the Bible. Go ahead, talk about it however you want to talk about it. You're going to be better off after you finish talking about it than when you started. But I've got Ed and Lorraine here on the line with us, Pete, hearing our discussion about Juneteenth, wanting to join the conversation. Good morning, Ed. How you doing?
Hey, good morning, Clint. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. That's again. We're on the phone here on In Touch News Radio with none other than the great Pete Edwards.
Assalamu alaikum, my brother.
Alaikum salam. Good morning. Good morning. What's on my mind is that temperature, because the last time I called in, I said I agree with Pete, and I'm calling in today to say I agree with Pete.
Wait a minute.
What's happening to me? I don't know. No. In all seriousness, I'm calling y'all from Orlando. I haven't had my coffee yet. And Clint, you know, we're fraternity brothers. We're in a group chat together, and I posted something that And I have to say this on the Juneteenth. I agree with you that it's significant because it forces our country to acknowledge its history. But as usual, this is a symbolic statement. I council. And it's like, come on, guys, we need real reform and change to benefit the African American community in this country. And here's the thing, if you're going to tell the story of Juneteenth, then you need to tell the story about May 20th when slavery was did in Florida. You need to understand that most northern states don't care about Juneteenth. It doesn't matter to them because they ended slavery far in front of some of the southern states. So this is a symbolic gesture. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party is what we did when in fact they've done nothing. A lynching bill that continues to get stalled. You have to ask yourself a question: why does that happen? You need infrastructure, yes. And that bill, if it were to pass, would help a lot of Black and brown people. But that is also being stalled right now. It's just, I'm watching our state, for example, roll back unemployment benefits, roll back voting rights. And at the same time, the Senate won't even investigate insurrection. Let's keep our eyes open. So I agree with Pete. You may be right, Clint. It may start out a historical teaching about it. Eventually, will be okay, turn into nothing but barbecues and parties. The same thing will happen to Juneteenth, and we're going to forget the true meaning behind why we're here celebrating this.
And the other thing,
so I appreciate the symbolism, but a lot more needs to be done.
The other thing, Ed, is we got to remember. When we talk to young people, particularly those under 30, we have to keep it real with them. The greatest percentage of people that are really thinking about Juneteenth, as far as the pain and everything with it, are people over 50. The people 30 and under, they have. I mean, it's like telling them that 60 years ago, I think it was 60 years ago, that the Supreme Court ruled that you can marry a white woman. We don't tell them that. You see what I'm saying? So they assume that it was there all the time. So my job in my senior years of age is to tell the story, no matter how painful it is, and also show not only my grandkids but other kids and young people who will listen the pain that I went through to cover up my mistakes and not recognizing that I should have been stronger in representing the Black cause or strengthening our community instead of depending on everybody else, including liberals and all. And to show you a perfect example of it, the gay rights movement owe everything to the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King and all. Even right here in the city of Tampa and St. Petersburg, they quoted. But guess who's one of the most despised groups in the LGBTQ movement? Black gay males, and then Black females that are gay are behind. They're not inclusive. You take Nadine Smith out the picture, what? So I'm saying to you, Republicans, conservative like myself, we still understand that we're still Black. We still understand that we have to find a coalition of all kind of people, including conservatives too, that understand if this country is going to go forward with the diversity and all, as painful as it is, we got to point out shortcomings, including our own. Now, some people will say, well, you're trying to get right with God before you go home. Well, you know what? If that's what it takes to get right with our community before I go home, I'm all for it. I'm just saying, brothers.
You're right on point, Pete. I want to thank you, Ed, for calling in. I appreciate that very much. Always, you're a great supporter of our show and listening in to us. We got to go to break right now. Keep listening, Ed, and enjoy your trip over in Orlando. Happy Father's Day to you. Hopefully you and the girls having a great time with your wife as well. We love you supporting our show. Pete, we're going to go to break, and we'll come back on the other side, pick this conversation up. Talk about Joe Biden. He got on the international stage, went elbow to elbow, eye to eye with Putin. Kamala Harris. Anybody seen her lately? Where's Kamala these days? And also, is Fox News winning with attaching Joe Biden to the border? We're going to come back right after this break and talk about some more issues affecting our community. You're listening to Touch News Radio, reality radio, where everybody can be a star. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
playing your favorite old school. Today's R&B. With a smooth touch of jazz. You're listening to In Touch Radio.
Don't miss the first annual Amateur Grillers Cook-Off coming to the Tampa Bay area on Labor Day weekend, September the 5th. Hosted by the Dr. K.C. Patel High School, located at 10721 Rollison Ranch Road, right here in Tampa, from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. There will be a $500 cash prize to the best amateur griller. If you feel that you've got the skills, then you need to bring your grill. It doesn't matter how big or how small. You can drive it up, push it up, pull it up, or even let grandma and grandpa help you set it up. Just bring the entire family out and enjoy some of the finest amateur grill meats. Sample the sauce and find out who has the best sauce. Bring your meat and put it on a plate, and let's see if you have what it takes. For vendors information, text 813-965-4456.
We're playing your favorite old school. Today's R&B. With a smooth touch of jazz. You're listening to In Touch Radio.
Clinton Paris, and I'm co-host here on Straight Up the Middle with none other than my fellow co-host, the great Pete Edwards. Good morning again, Pete. How you feel?
Oh man, I was ready to come out of retirement and be a DJ again.
Listen. Did you? Is Ed on your payroll? Because out of nowhere he shows up again, agreeing with you. Ed's a staunch Democrat. I just get worried when I see Democrats sliding over there agreeing with Republicans like this. We have to research that, get to the bottom of what's really going on there, Pete.
No, I think Ed understands like I do, like Malcolm talked about. There's no real permanent party for us, but Ed understands like I do that a lot of Democrats who claim they're Democrats stabbed us in the back. In fact, they don't even try to stab you in the back; they just stab you right up front. But when Republicans when we show where we stand consistently out front, then we're all racists and Uncle Toms and that kind of stuff. So it's like that. But I'm thinking, I'm serious when I say this, Clint. When I look at, we got to divide in this within our community, income-wise, thought process-wise. And we got to deal with that. We have to deal with it. For an example, somebody asked me what I thought about the border issues. Let me tell you my take on that. There is segregation even within the people of color coming across the border. If I was an active political person down there by the border territory, I would take every bilingual black person I could find and go into Guatemala, go into El Salvador, and go in all those countries, particularly in talking with, and even some Mexicans who are a darker color Mexican, and tell them, hey, you know what? If you want to get some respect, then first of all, you need to understand that if you come into America, don't come cheaply. Make them pay you that you deserve, number one. But if you come into America, let us remind you that they're going to treat you as bad, or they're going to treat you maybe a little bit better than they treat us, as long as they can squeeze out profits from you. I guarantee you, if that happened, and a coalition of black America along with Hispanics who really understand the nature of being black and Hispanic, if we got together and did that, and then the people decide not to come, and then the illegals who are here and all decide not to work to clean up the hog farm and the toilets and the whole bit, this thing will switch out in a minute. But the problem is, a lot of the immigrants come over here, they look, even the illegal ones, even the gang members and the whole bit, they look at the black community as the bottom of the barrel. we look at them as if they have no power. And so when you take those two dynamics, what happens? Capitalism and racist white people take advantage of both. They use the immigrants to say, hey, y'all better than black people. We look at the immigrants and say, hey, y'all don't mean nothing to us, and we're not going to deal with the issue at all. So that's the paradox in all of that. The border, another good example is how they treat the Haitians different from the regular people coming across the border. Now, I will say this, the Haitian community, a lot of them, when they come into America, and you can look at the progress made in Miramar and all down there in Broward County and the whole bit. One of the things they do, they coalesce together, and they don't depend on involving the average African American to participate in their political movement. Now, we don't like to say that outdoors because we always say keep our business behind closed doors. But the kids under the young people and the kids, the teenagers are saying, hey, y'all been faking it for a long time. We're not going to deal with that hypocrisy like that. So that's where it is. That's my thoughts, my brother.
Yeah, and but that's not uncommon. That's a replay of what happened to the Polish, the Italians, and the Irish, and we can go down the list of people who've immigrated to America that have come into this country, coalesced around their culture, and made. And we see that throughout the Northeast, where they've made big inroads in American culture and communities, so to speak. We've been left out. One, go back to slavery. The second one was Jim Crow. You had laws stopping it. And slowly, all you have to do is, I know you may go through our Black communities and they don't look the same, but when you go out into the larger communities, out in Riverview and some of these other places, there are massive Black communities that are starting to emerge because of the number of people that have moved from those other communities into those communities. So I don't doubt what you're saying about the border, but let's talk about the border for a little bit on the political realm. Fox News decided, and I think it's connected to what Fox News does with race and some of the other conservative media outlets. What can we use against Joe Biden that will stoke up our base? And I thought that was how they would utilize the border. Of course, Joe Biden comes in, he gets rid of Donald Trump's policies and says, listen, for kids, we're not sending kids back. You can stop. That's just a non-starter. You can talk about something else. But kids that come over, we're not sending kids back. Is Fox News making the border an issue for Biden? And is that really just destroying Kamala Harris's future as a politician?
No, they're just taking advantage of what if it was a different story that BuzzFeed or CNN or Underground News would take advantage of. It's nothing wrong with playing to your base. Remember, as you play to the base, the desire is to recruit those who are considering which way they want to go. Do they want to go with
the independents, so to speak,
or the young people that's coming up behind you? So I don't. Kamala Harris, as I said last week, wrong sister, wrong topic, wrong position. And she is who she is. She's uncomfortable really dealing with nuts and bolts issues as far as it affects people of color, as far as it affects the working class African American community, as far as it reflects to even those down and out. You only have to look at her record that speaks for itself when she was Attorney General. My God, this lady wanted to give prison time for people who kids didn't go to school instead of looking at a lot of other factors. Just look at the record. She is who she is. I respect her as being the first, some people say semi-black, but I respect her as being the first person of color, female.
Wait, hold on, Pete. Hold it right there.
I didn't say I felt that.
Hold on, Pete. Hold it. You did that last week. Are you implying she's not black enough?
I'm implying that from the position in which she came up, it's very difficult for her to identify with hard-working, regular Afro-American.
How is that different than Obama? How is she any different than Obama's upbringing?
Well, basically, they're the same. They will protect the upper middle class and upper class black community, but only when it's necessary that they can progress up the ladder will they look at those who are behind them. And it's the same thing on the Republican side. People got to remember, Tim Scott never would have been where he was at if he had took more of a fair approach to dealing with civil rights issues and the whole bit. But look who his mentor was, Senator Jim DeMint. So once Jim DeMint said, hey, we ain't got to worry about this brother going off the deep end. We ain't got to worry about this brother being a senator like Edward Brooke. We don't have to worry about being... See, if Tim Scott and Kamala Harris and even Byron Donald from down in Southwest Florida, if they took even half of a step into the real issues in the black community that Adam Clayton Powell did, then people would have them respect him more. And remember, Adam Clayton Powell was a red-bone playboy that would knock off a white woman just as quick as he knocked off anybody else. And I mean, it speaks for itself.
This is the show, Pete. We can't talk about people knocking off red bones.
Well, what I'm saying is, from a business purpose, understand, Adam Clayton Powell, he ascended into power because he kept balance with the real hood, but he also kept balance with powerful white women and men. That's how he got his power. Now, it took a Southern congressman right out of Tampa, Florida, Sam Gibbons, to dethrone him, okay? Yeah. So when I say knocking off, I'm not talking about from a sexual standpoint. I'm talking about where you, and I want to clean that up and make sure people understand. I'm not talking about a sexual standpoint. I'm talking about from a standpoint of business and capitalization and maneuverability in order to get what you want. And that's how he got the power through the congressional senior system of Congress until they took him down. He got greedy, and then they took him down. But, I mean, it is what it is, because we understand that there are certain people that come out of the black community that say, hey, I'm for power with the people and all. There have been certain mayors that have come through, whether it's Cleveland, Cincinnati, a lot of different mayors. And what do they accomplish? Time they get in more than anything else, to build a damn stadium for professional owners of football and baseball teams. And then they said, well, okay, we'll give you 10% of the contract to black contractors. So when I say knocking them off, what did he say? By any means necessary?
That's Malcolm X.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So those folks that got those coalitions, it was by any means necessary that they can obtain, and not only obtain, but retain their power. So even though I'm conservative, I'm a militant conservative when it looks like I see issues within our black community that are being stymied, not because so much of the white community keep us stymied, but if it affects the power of those we elect that look like us, and they can't stay in and they don't have to give an accountability, they're worse off, in my opinion, than Klansmen is trying to keep us in the
But all this comes down to, a core dynamic. You mentioned the word, and it really is about power. The advancement of our communities. There are people who had power and would benefit from segregation. When you talk about Black Wall Street, the reason Black Wall Street worked was they couldn't go shop other places, and so money had to drive itself into that community. But there were other people who were prepared to benefit from desegregation and opening things up. So power, you're right about that. But one of the things about this border situation, Pete, though, I think is that you think what's driving Joe Biden's approval rating down, or is it something that the economy? What is it that, because he's down from 56% last month to I think 52% now approval rating. What's driving that number down in your mind?
Well, because the base now that the election is over and it's almost 6 months after the election, the base is going as usual. The people have to understand that when you really evaluate the definition of moderate, conservative, and all like that, Joe Biden, under the Reagan, Abraham Lincoln concept, and even under the Jack Kemp concept, under that kind of concept of thinking, Joe Biden would be a moderate or conservative Republican today, under the old definitions and all. Even today, he still is a moderate a moderate Republican. And I'm gonna tell you how you're gonna really find out real quick. You ready for this?
Okay.
He's kept some things that Trump put into play as far as foreign policy concerned. When you look at his appointments, he's very cautious as to who he is appointing, similar to Obama. When you look at what they already know, they've been known that neither the H. Bill 1 voting rights or the John Lewis voting rights thing is not going to pass. But Biden is giving cover to those Democrats who don't want it to pass anyway. So he is who he is, and so that's not going to change. And remember, the African Americans that are sticking with Biden at this point, to an extent, have been self-serving. Because you would think after 6 months of him being in office, almost 6 months or whatever, you would think that they would come up with a even more meaningful crime reform bill and build it on top of what Trump tried to do. You don't hear that. Then you don't hear this issue about empowerment zones that Tim Scott and all them brag about that Trump put into play, the empowerment zone. They haven't built upon that, and I'm going to remind people a historical note that the true empowerment zones that should have been built upon the basic foundation now, or go back and look at, was the one that Jack Kemp, when he was running for vice president, put in his format. And then they should take a look at the principles of empowerment as far as economic development, all when Richard Nixon, of all people, and the Reverend Leon Sullivan, when they formed the Philadelphia thing that helped out South America. And I remind people that the FDOT today, with the same set aside for minority contractors, you know who put that in, Clint? Richard Nixon and the black upper middle class leadership that's still connected with our blue collar neighborhoods. That's who put that in. So that's a historical note for you, my brother.
Well, a lot of people fail to realize, again, if you go back and look at power, every president, for example, you mentioned the MLK Day of Service. Well, heck, Rick Scott created that funding mechanism in the state of Florida, staunch Republican. For whatever reasons, and of course, now DeSantis has come along and dismantled a lot of that. So oftentimes you'll get that crossover. But in my mind, watching Biden, I was trying to think about, what's really affecting his numbers. And I thought with border, I don't think that's it. I think his inability to move some of his major agenda items forward. I think the Democrats are really bothered that he spent so much time waiting on this bipartisan support for his infrastructure bill and the voting rights bill. They need to move those two issues forward. And then this week we had Joe Manchin finally come along and say, hey, all right, if you include some ID requirements and, some other campaign spending stuff, then okay, I can go along with it. And Mitch McConnell immediately said, that's not going to happen. So what I'm thinking is going to happen in the next couple of weeks, Pete, is the Democrats are going to go it alone. And they're going to go it alone on the voting rights bill first. I think that's going to be the easier one. And once that goes forward, you're going to have some Republicans join in on the infrastructure bill because, one, that's going to bring home some pet projects to their communities. What do you think about that?
Well, have you ever thought about that by design, Biden is tanking his own initiatives? Has that ever crossed your mind that Joe Biden,
no, explain the logic.
He's tanking his own issues. Joe is not. See, if you've been a part of a Senate club like Joe has, there's probably a lot of skeletons still in the closet. And if you get, no, I'm serious when I say that. So Joe is by design. They know up front. They knew up front in the beginning that they weren't going to accomplish this thing with the voting rights. They're not going to get the infrastructure bill done. him and Mitch McConnell, my fellow Republican, are in the same boat in the fact that they're giving cover to Democrats who really not interested either, because it's by any means necessary that I get reelected, and because the Democratic base is so scattered, so splintered, they're not consistent like the Republican base. It's in Joe's best interest to let it fall. He can say it's the Republican fault and all, but the bottom line is, if they wanted to push it, they would have had 2 or 3 come to Jesus meetings by now. But the creature that Biden is, and the old Senate creature at that, they're going to let it drop by the wayside. And here's why. They realize that the base of the Democratic Party, as I told you before, is going to go like Rip Van Winkle and sleep through the 2022 primaries and the whole bit. So it's to their advantage to wait till it's time for re-election, in which he won't run, and the candidate won't be Kamala Harris either. So I want to put that out there now. So Biden is playing the game. It looks good, but the reason why they're able to get away with it, because black people, we don't pay consistently on what's going on in front of you. You can say whatever you want about Trump base and all of that, but I tell you what, they stay on top of everything over and over and over again. You take out Stacey Abrams and a few other people, we don't take it. We don't stay on top of nothing. So that's why you have the dynamics you have. And if you've been in the club long enough, and as long as you're still in the club, my brother, you do what you got to do to make sure you stay in the club. You feel me?
Well, listen, I am not like Ed and Rain. I will not be wooed by you, Pete, into agreeing with you the way that he is so easily, swayed as if you bought him a drink at happy hour. I completely disagree with that. I'm gonna tell you why. I think this: if Joe Biden does not get the infrastructure bill passed, or voting rights, I'm thinking probably the voting rights bill. That's the John Lewis bill. That's got to be get through. And I'll tell you why. There won't be a show out for the midterm elections. He's going to lose the Senate. He might even lose, Congress, the House of Representatives, and he'll be a lame duck. He'll be stalled like Obama was in a large part of his second term. So he's got to get out something that gets everybody motivated. The other thing is, if that infrastructure bill doesn't get passed, inflation is already starting to tick up.
That's true.
The economy is going to be going in a negative direction, and the midterms, the Democrats will get slaughtered. And so, because you're going to get a fake election run by Trump, he's going to be out campaigning, but he is not going to be running for office, but he's going to be campaigning. And so he is going to just churn up that Republican base to get out the vote. Democrats will be suppressed, not motivated, and get, they're going to get slaughtered. So I think that, to me, is probably his greatest risk. Pete, I just got the message, though, from our Princess Anna back in studio, the wonderful board operator, telling me, flag it, your time is about up. So I get claimed for hogging your time all the time. Pete, why don't you give us some final comments? We've got about 2 minutes.
All right, let me
on
give you
what you think we can expect coming up.
I think you need, locally, it is important. It is important that I remind our local people. I told you Clinton was coming up. The police union runs the city. If you don't believe it, look at this whole fake thing of trying to improve the civilian review board, councilmen switching and changing out the whole bit. This town is a tinderbox. And what happened with city government, city council on Thursday didn't help things. It could have been a little bit better. So I'm telling my folks, be safe, pay attention to the politics, and stop protecting these gangsters in our neighborhood. More and more of our kids are getting beat up. More and more of our mothers are getting beat up and taken. Their money is being taken when they go to buy a bag of weed. What kind of foolishness is that? We need to. I'm serious with that. So we need to clean that
agree.
Up. And I'll leave it at that.
You're dead on, Pete. I say this. I'm all about self-help. There's no cavalry coming over the hill to save you from yourself or save your community from its own people. Anything you want change, you have to be the agent of change. You have to be the person that's willing to take on the issues and take the risk. I say this now to my kids and anybody that'll listen to me. Everything costs. You may not know what it's going to cost until after you buy it. But everything costs. It's going to cost you something. And if you're not willing to pay the cost, then you're not going to be able to get the change that you want, because always, no matter what you do, you have to pay for the improvements you want in your own community, be it with time, effort, commitment, whatever, sacrifice, whatever it may be. And I just want to encourage everybody, have a great Father's Day, Pete. To all the fathers out there, go out, spend some time with your kids, enjoy the gifts they buy you with your own money, and be safe. And we'll see you back again next week. Pete, have a great week. This is In Touch News Radio.
How about enjoying 5 minutes of fame as a father? 5 minutes, that's all I want. All right,
man. You have a good week, Pete. And everybody stay tuned for The Sole Purpose coming up right next on this station. Take care.